Okay, I think we're ready to get started. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all, wherever you are in the world. And welcome to this week's edition of the Thursday Talk webinars on DME for Peace. Just in case you're new or you may have forgotten, my name is Jack Farrell, and I am the DME for Peace project manager at Search for Common Ground. And I'm going to be your host today. I'm calling in from a small village on the east coast of Ireland called Rostrevor, where I grew up. And I think it's the most beautiful setting I've ever hosted a webinar from. So this is the fifth webinar as part of our series on digital adaptation and technological innovation in peace building. We're doing this series in partnership with Build Up. So in light of COVID-19, there is an obvious need for practitioners across the peace building, development and humanitarian nexus to embrace technology as a means to build peace and create enduring change. And as technology keeps moving forward, many NGOs and peace building organizations are struggling to keep up. I've spoken with many colleagues about utilizing new technologies, and in particular artificial intelligence, trying to identify opportunities for its application, and I'm often greeted with a look of bemusement or despair. So luckily, we have a couple of experts with us today to help us understand how to use artificial intelligence peace building a little bit more. I'm delighted to welcome Branka of AI for Peace and Laura Clark-Murray of Omdena, who are going to lead a discussion on using AI to create lasting peace, building bridges between AI experts and peace builders. Just a note, if you have a question during today's presentation, you can write it on the question function on your GoToWebinar dashboard, and we'll address it once we reach the Q&A. I'm now going to hand over to today's guests. Branka and Laura, you are very welcome to the Thursday Talks. Please feel free to take it away when you're ready.
Thank you, Jack. It's such a pleasure to be here. Good morning to everybody, or good evening, good afternoon, as Jack said, depending from which part of the world are you joining us from. It's such a pleasure to have such a global audience as well. And thank you so much for DME for Peace for hosting this session, and especially thank you, Jack and Jennifer, for inviting us. As Jack said, Laura and I will have this pleasure today to talk with you about this sometimes intimidating topic. We hope it will be less intimidating at the end of this session, and we hope to inspire you and get you more excited about thinking of all different ways how we can utilize AI to create lasting peace. And we named this session Building Bridges Between Artificial Intelligence Experts and Peace Builders. So this is our intention as well, to make these connections, to make these two groups closer to each other, to work together on this goal of making the world more peaceful place to live in for all of us. So welcome again to all of you at this Thursday DME for Peace talk. So as Jack said, there are two of us panelists today, although you can't see us, this is us. So my colleague Laura and I will be talking with you today, and we will give a short introduction at the beginning and then try to use most of the time at the end to talk with you more and to answer all of the questions that you might have. So my name is Branka, and I'm a founder and executive director of an organization called AI for Peace. I am originally from Balkans, where I spent most of my life, and I was working there, covering all of the countries in the Western Balkans, working on reconciliation and peace building, democratization, and human rights protection. 3 years ago, I had a chance to come to US as a Rotary International Peace Fellow, and I got this amazing opportunity to do a research on utilizing artificial intelligence and more concretely machine learning in advancing the peace building field. So let me tell you a bit more about AI for Peace as an organization. So We are a nonprofit organization based in California, and we are working throughout the world. So our members and advisors are based in different countries in both global north and global south. And our vision is a future in which AI benefits peace, security, and sustainable development, and where diverse voices influence creation of AI and related technologies. So this diversity is at the center of our organization, and we really aim to not only reach out to all parts of the world, but to get the voices from all parts of the world, and we really believe that this diversity is necessary for making this utilization of AI in the future more peaceful. What we noticed as a group of people and enthusiasts, so to say, when we started this organization and when we looked at the AI and utilization of AI, we realized that military uses of AI are multiple and advanced. There are a lot of applications and especially a lot of investments coming in this field, either in developing warfare platforms or simulation and training, threat monitoring, autonomous weapons, autonomous systems in general. So there is a lot of discussion happening in this area for many years now around so-called killer robots, autonomous weapons being used. And this is a very important topic for AI for peace as well. And many of us are in this area because of this reason, wanting to make our voices stronger for opposing the utilization of AI in this sense. But what we want to emphasize is that there is also a huge area outside of this national security utilization or defense and concentration of ministries of defense when we talk about discourse on AI. And this is this field of peace building. And we realize that exploring and utilizing AI in peace building is still very limited. So our intention is to talk more about peace building, and just for this audience to make it more clear what we actually mean when we talk about peace building. Our intention, as I said, is not only to move away from this notion of national security and concentrate more on human security protection, but also move away from this notion of peace as a negative peace, as only absence of war or absence of conflict. So we want to concentrate on this more active approach to peace building as a strategic activity, as an action that is strengthening peace intentionally, not only avoiding but more transforming conflict, so making sure that they don't escalate in violent conflict. So our intention is to see what are the tools out there and to provide the tools to build something more than just the absence of war. And we want to see how we can strengthen the capacities of different populations in different countries for managing conflict, transforming conflict, and then laying the foundations for not only sustainable peace, but also sustainable development as well. So with this, we are asking two main questions, and especially looking at this field, we know that neither AI or problems in peace building are new in our world. Especially when we talk about AI, we are asking this question of why AI and why now. And we believe that AI is not only the future, so AI is already here today, affecting people across the planet. And we see multiple applications of AI in different industries across different fields. A lot of conversation is out there, especially now during pandemic, related to healthcare, finance, education, even entertainment. And why is this happening now? Why is this such a big topic now? So there are a couple of reasons that are happening and that we just want our audience to be aware of and informed about. And that is, first of all, the availability of data. The cost of cloud access, the data storage, the entire computer processing of all of this vast amount of data has fallen, and it's much more available not only to companies but to general audiences as well. So there is a large availability of inexpensive and often free data and data sets, and we will hear more from Laura about this as well, publicly available data that we can see how we can utilize to have more evidence-based decision making. Combined with this is machine learning and all of the advances that are coming in this field, development of this technology and different ML approaches, as methods of data analysis that are more and more available to people as experts to utilize in combination with the data that is out there. The other question that we are asking is why, again, peace, and why now? And we are trying to look at this intersection of the two fields of AI and peace. So for this audience, I don't think it's even necessary to mention this, but just for global listeners, we want to stress this, how important tackling peace is. And we perceive conflict and violence as some of the biggest challenges humanity is facing today. And when we see them overlapping with other challenges and how much these issues are very interconnected, like climate change, poverty, disease, or famine, we see how important and urgent it is, especially in this moment, again, I'm mentioning pandemic, to tackle these issues and to see what are all of the tools available out there for us to be able to tackle these challenges more effectively. So I'm mentioning this, some of the latest results that many organizations in this field are following, including the latest results in the Global Peace Index published just a couple of months ago, revealing that the average level of global peacefulness deteriorated for the 9th time in 12 years. So we see that the world, although some parts of the world are more peaceful, we see this deterioration of many levels, not only in terms of conflict, again, and violence, but in terms of positive peace as well. It's not even, again, necessary to mention this, that we are in unprecedented humanitarian crisis, where this number is increasing every single year, with the current data telling us that more than 70 million people were forcibly displaced from their homes due to either famine or natural disasters or conflict and wars in the previous year. We are also looking, as I said, to these different elements of positive peace as well, and we especially look at democracy and the decline of democracy in many parts of the world. And we are aware that in many countries there is a misuse of different technologies as well, which we are trying as peace builders to be very aware of, that anything can be used and misused as an application and as an influencer to the level of peace in society. So with all of this, we see that peace is in an urgent need of allies today, and we believe that AI has a potential to be one. So having this in mind, at AI for Peace, we concentrated on 3 focus areas of our work: humanitarian action, human rights and democracy, and human security. We are targeting 2 main target groups, and we work with peace builders. Our intention is to inform peace builders about potentials of AI, and we want peace builders to feel more confident and to feel informed and ready to speak up and act when we are talking about this intersection of AI and peace building. And then the second stakeholder that we are very much interested in are actually AI and data scientists. So we want to have this 2-way type of communication, and we want to make sure that data scientists as well become a bit peace builders themselves as well, and to be more informed. What does it mean actually to embed this peace building approach in design, developing, and applying artificial intelligence in their work. And we want them committed to use AI for creating lasting peace. So I will just quickly mention a couple of ways how AI for Peace is doing this. And one of the first things that we did when we piloted, so we piloted the organization just recently in January at the World Peace Conference that was organized here in California. And a couple of months later, we had this chance to cooperate with University of Berkeley and Duke University in North Carolina and publish this AI Explain, the first non-technical guide for policymakers trying to do exactly that, to translate some of the complicated concepts to make sure that we understand the difference between narrow artificial intelligence and general intelligence, artificial superintelligence, to look at different applications across different industries, but also to get on board on this topic on AI ethics and what does it mean to talk about bias and AI, diversity, safety and security, privacy issues. So we believe that Peacebuilders have a big role to play in this and need to become part of the discussion around these issues. Another thing that we do, we are trying again to clarify some of the concepts, sometimes threats and sometimes possibilities that are coming from AI field. So we are covering the issue of misinformation and disinformation and how AI can be used to tackle these problems. We are looking at proactively using artificial intelligence and especially different resources out there like satellite imagery or drone imagery to work on accountability for war crimes or in general for crimes and violence. We are explaining deepfakes and how deepfakes can influence peace in the world, democracy, how they're impacting human rights. And we are also tackling facial recognition and what implications of this technology are currently not only in US, but throughout the world. One of the projects that I will just briefly mention is this AI Policy Pandemic Challenge that we had a chance to do with our colleagues from Omdena at the beginning of pandemic, trying to utilize and see how we can utilize data and AI to evaluate the impact of existing pandemic policies on the most vulnerable populations. My colleague Laura will tell you more about this specific challenge and then mention some other exciting examples of how Omdena is actually working with data scientists throughout the world to tackle some of the world's biggest challenges. With this, we wanted to motivate you as well as actors in this field to think more proactively how you can use AI in your work. And to do this, we wanted to mention this possibility of organizing another pandemic challenge that can potentially be around this peace building issues. So I will ask Jake at the end of this webinar to share with you a link as well where we want to crowdsource some ideas from you and to think together in this direction, how we can utilize AI in peace building. I put here some resources that can be helpful for you to learn more about not only utilizing AI for peace. So these are some resources on AI for Peace website, but also resources from some of other organizations that are really trying to explain either basics or give some advanced possibilities of people to learn more about this field. So I will stop here. This is where you can find me and AI for Peace, and I'm really happy to continue this discussion and to talk more with you in the Q&A part of the session or after the webinar as well. But at this point, I will give a word to my colleague Laura to tell you more about Omdena and some of the practical ways how Omdena is utilizing AI to make a world a more peaceful place. Thank you so much, Laura.
Wonderful. Thank you, Branka. Thank you very much for that fantastic overview, and welcome to everyone here. I'm really delighted to have this opportunity to have this kind of conversation with all of you about AI and peace building. My name's Laura Clark Murray. I'm head of operations and partnerships for Omdena, and I just want to say briefly a few words about Omdena. We were founded on two primary ideas. One, what if we brought together artificial intelligence and domain experts from around the world to collaborate on projects that really matter to them, give them the opportunity to do good work in this world? And secondly, what if we matched those teams of experts with the people and organizations who are attempting to tackle real world and significant problems? And that's what we've done. We've created a platform where teams of very diverse experts and practitioners from around the globe come together to build artificial intelligence solutions regarding important and challenging problems in our world. The next slide, please. Thanks. In the 14 months since we've launched, we've executed on 22 projects across many sectors with partners including UN agencies, NGOs, startups, foundations, and corporations. We've brought together collectively almost 1,300 experts to collaborate on these projects. They work in groups of about 50 people on our very intensive 8-week projects, and delivering deployable and actionable solutions to really fascinating, tough problems. And that's how we connected with Branka and AI for Peace. So today, what I'd like to do is give you an overview of a few of our Omdena projects. And my hope is that these will be relevant to you and the work that you do. I mean, AI can be very intimidating. And my hope is that by sharing these examples, you might see some parallels with the problems you face, and hopefully be inspired to explore how AI might be applied to move you closer to the kinds of solutions you're seeking. I'll be touching on 3 different concepts. Number 1, the idea that text can be data. When we expand our ideas about data to include text, the written word, etc., we open up opportunities to address all sorts of problems. Number 2, indirect effects of policy actions can be understood. While data-driven policy making isn't new, the kinds of data science advances that Branka was mentioning can help us to understand the indirect effects of policies on populations that were not necessarily considered. And number 3, analyzing satellite imagery can supplement traditional forms of data to provide powerful new insights. So let's go through these one by one. In this first case study, our partner was the World Resources Institute. So here's the context. To address land degradation around the world, significant restoration efforts are underway. But conflicts on the ground between neighbors, farmers and wildlife, and between citizens and local governments get in the way of those restoration efforts. If these conflicts over land can be identified and resolved, then restoration can continue. And that's what WRI was focused on. So the goal with this project was to figure out where are land conflicts happening, and then to identify the existing government policy that's relevant for each conflict. In this case, our data was text and news stories in particular. We looked to a database of 65,000 news stories, and these stories were about all sorts of things. You know, the kinds of news stories you would find in local newspapers. This project was focused on India. I'm not sure if I said that directly. So we use the branch of artificial intelligence known as natural language processing to effectively read these news reports and determine which stories were about land conflicts. And then for those stories, our models identified key players as well as the type of conflicts that were occurring. The next step was to use these same techniques to analyze existing government policies and then create a model to match the news stories about conflicts to the relevant policy. And then finally, for the project, we created an interactive map tool so that the user could see where the conflicts are happening, what type of conflicts they are, and which policies can be used to address them. Okay. Now, once trained, our AI models were able to quickly process a vast number of news stories. And that same task would take months, if not years, for a human to do. And ultimately, these trained models can read news feeds, identifying conflicts in real time. So text as data. Beyond news stories, text data can be compiled from, for example, public social media comments. In our work with the World Energy Council recently, we used natural language processing techniques to understand how citizens around the world view their role in the transition to clean energy. It's effectively, in this case, a way to survey vast numbers of people without even knowing what questions to ask. We're able to hear what's important to them. And in another project, we used natural language processing techniques to ferret out threatening tweets as a way to intervene before gun violence occurs. So you might think about how understanding what people think and feel and about what is being reported on might be a source of data for you in the work that you're doing. Okay, the second concept I want to touch on is this idea that data science can be used to understand the indirect impact of policies. And more generally, that AI and data science techniques can be used to explore a very broad problem, to see what the data reveals, and unearth what is interesting for further pursuit. And that's the case with this project. And this is the project in which we partnered with AI for Peace. And as we all know, COVID-19 lockdown policies were put in place around the world earlier in this year to stop the spread of the virus. That was the key focus. With this project, we set out to understand, well, what those policies might mean for vulnerable populations. So we started with this very broad problem statement, and that required us to narrow down what policies we would study, such as workplace closings and restrictions on movement within a location. And then we also needed to define vulnerability. What did we mean? What did we want to look at? And to do that, we used known international indices and metrics, as well as combing data sources that captured other aspects of vulnerability. And for this project, we chose to look how various factors, such as wage loss and access to critical non-COVID healthcare, were affected by stringent pandemic policies. There isn't time in this session to dig through the details of this project. It was fascinating and very complex, and you'll be getting the link where you can learn more, and I'd be happy to follow up. But the key takeaways for today are that AI and data science can be very useful for starting with a broad problem area, discovering correlations in the data that can point the way to future work. And then within the world of policymaking, advances in data science and in the quantity of data stored allows for consideration of broader implications of any particular policy. And this type of work tends to reveal the gaps in the data being collected. So there's an opportunity here in the case of a global crisis to get ahead of things and discover the data that is missing. These kinds of techniques can be used for other types of policy areas. For example, we've used AI techniques to understand the implications of student debt in the United States, including, for example, the heavy toll it can take on mental health. And also, we've crafted data sets that expose the increase in domestic violence in India during shelter-in-place orders. Moving on to the third major concept, and these are all quite different. I want to address here how publicly light imagery can be used in combination with more traditional data sources that you may be more familiar with to get around data roadblocks and gain new insights. So in this project, in this case study, we partnered with an NGO in Nigeria a country where more than 100 million people lack stable access to electricity. And the goal in this project was to figure out where solar power installations were most desperately needed and where they would do the most good. However, the data about population density and access to the national power grid was incomplete and incorrect. It was a huge data roadblock. So to get around that, we looked to nighttime satellite images. Our model could, quote unquote, see regions that went completely dark at night, meaning they had no access to power. And then those areas became our focus. And then through analysis of population and other data, our models were able to identify which of those regions were home to mid-sized communities with schools and medical facilities in need of stable power. So through this melding of data sources, including the satellite imagery, we were able to reveal high priority sites for renewable energy installations. Combining satellite image analysis, the next slide, thanks. Combining satellite image analysis with traditional data sets can be very powerful. In an upcoming project with the World Resources Institute, we'll be modeling economic well-being for regions in India. And there are several challenges in using old methods of tracking economic outcomes over time. So we'll add in this component of satellite imagery where the analysis can help to see where urbanization and agricultural changes are being made. And combining that together with household level data, we can come up with an economic well-being model for a particular region. So the takeaway here on this particular concept is that lack of data doesn't have to be a showstopper for solving problems. There are very creative ways to get around that by combining different sources. And in particular, AI analysis of satellite imagery is a really promising way to supplement traditional forms of data. So I've covered a lot here. Those were really complex projects and problems that I'm just touching on at the highest of levels. So if you're interested in those, Jack, I believe, has posted the links in the chat, or he will be, and please come and look at our website, excuse me, where we have lots of case studies posted. I also invite you to attend our upcoming demo day. We've been doing a series of demo days to dive a little deeper on these projects. We have one coming up. We have videos of our previous demo days on our website. And I very much welcome any kind of reaching out, and look forward to the Q&A here in the next part of this conversation. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you very much, Laura. And Branka, do you want to say a little bit more about the sort of peace building challenge as I add the form into the chat box for everybody listening?
Yes, perfect. Thanks so much, Jack, and thanks, Laura, for this amazing overview. It's not easy to present in such a short period of time all of the amazing projects that Omdena is working on, but the idea was to showcase some of them and then invite you and motivate you to go to Omdena website as well and look in more details how all of these techniques can be used in different peace building related topics. But the idea is also to think and motivate you to think how you can maybe jump on one of them, either on existing peace building or existing AI challenges that Omdena is doing, or thinking together about some potential future directly related peace building challenge. So this is what we are putting here as an option to tackle some of the world challenges through cooperation between peace builders and AI experts. And I personally believe that there is no better way to learn more about AI and data than doing this together with data scientists in a challenge like this. And this is the opportunity that we had in AI for Peace through this pandemic challenge. So with this idea, we created for this webinar this Google form where we invite you to share with us whatever you wish. It's completely anonymous, and whichever question you wish to answer to gather some of the ideas from your own work. We want to crowdsource these problems that you're tackling in your everyday work. We want to bring this grassroots level as well. We don't believe that problems can be tackled with top-down approach. We want to tackle them with this bottom-up and have community engagement in this. So Jack, I believe, shared the link, and we will also put the link on the website to be active for a couple of more days. So feel free to share this with your colleagues as well, so we brainstorm about this together. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you so much, Branka. In your chat box, I recognize that I posted a billion links for everyone to access today. So just a note, all of the links that we posted alongside today's webinar will be accessible on the DME for Peace website later today alongside the recording. To our audience, thank you for your patience. We're now going to open up to your questions. A couple of notes about our format for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Thursday Talks. You can submit a question in two ways. The first is through the question function on your GoToWebinar dashboard, which will allow you to type your question. The second is to click on the hand icon, which will raise your hand and allow us to unmute your microphone. When you do submit your question, we ask that you submit your name and affiliation. And just a note, as I mentioned, these talks are recorded and posted on DME for Peace, so that those who are not able to join us at this time can go back and listen to the presentation and the discussion. I also want to pose the audience a question. My brain was kicking into sort of hyperdrive as I listened to Laura and Branka speak about the potential applications of this work. I'd love to hear some of your initial ideas before we get to the peace building challenge about where you see the potential for artificial intelligence and solutions that utilizes technology in the peace building field, and potential applications that we could think about together. I'm also going to use my moderator's privilege to ask the first question because I'm fascinated by this. And Laura, in case study 1, you mentioned that by using natural language processing, it took thousands of articles to train the system. I'm curious to find out sort of what that kind of process was like, how you decided on the key words, and how long the process took. The reason I ask is one of the challenges that we have in the peace building field and any potential application of natural language processing here is that our evaluations and all of our data tends to be locked up in sort of these 80-page reports. And we don't have a sort of universal coding system for the outputs or outcomes of peace building work. So I'm curious to learn more about that process.
Okay, that's such an excellent question. So thank you. Yes, so here's the key thing to keep in mind, that with machine learning, what you can do is you're training. You can give a model examples that you've hand labeled to train the model, and then you tell the model, this is for, in our case, land conflicts. These are news stories about land conflicts. So we give a subset of a couple hundred articles, I believe was the number, that we, together with World Resources Institute, labeled appropriately, and we hand that over to the model to learn, such that when the model is given articles that haven't been labeled, we can then see how accurate it is. So we go through that training process. That's critical. So we figure out, we can get precise on the accuracy. Once the model is accurate, well, then you can give it other material that it's never seen before that has not been labeled for it to run through. So in the case of what you're describing, these 80-page reports, there's no universal coding. What that process would actually look like would likely be some teams of people, and it would need to be data scientists together with domain experts, most likely, to help us understand, well, what's important in those reports, use some examples, train the model, and then let it loose. And I believe that's an aspect of what's behind what we're seeing with this massive project around COVID and medical documents around COVID, where actually I shouldn't get into that. It's such a big project. But hopefully that answers your question. It's about training.
Yeah, and I think that that training piece is what's intimidating to so many people. And yeah, they're trying to get someone who understands the data science connected with the domain expert, I think is one of the best sort of pieces of the work that both you and Branka are doing. Our next question comes from Neil Davis. And Neil seems to have really enjoyed your presentation because he's asked, what advice do you give to those who are earlier in their career and want to get involved in this field?
Branka, is that for you or for me, do you think?
So I'm also thinking it would be nice to clarify in which career, because I think we are again talking about two ways how we can approach the topic, and one is actually from the data science side of the story, and this is the place where Omdena is a perfect place to be. If you are, Neil, a data scientist or have an aspiration to become one, I definitely recommend joining the challenge, and this is such an excellent way to learn. This community is sharing and learning together throughout the 2 months, and then later on as well. I think this community has hundreds and hundreds of people throughout the world with different levels of knowledge of data science. So I would definitely say this is the way to go. If you are on the other side of the story of becoming a peace builder, then definitely I think DME for Peace would be a nice way to start and to inform yourself more about the work, to go hands-on in the problems in your community. And then if you think about the intersection of the two fields, again, I would say start from the basics. This is why we published the AI guide to just help people inform themselves about those necessary concepts to be able to understand what is happening in this field. And then again, having this hands-on experience of utilizing the technology yourself is, I believe, the best way to learn how to do it.
Great. Thank you so much, Branka and Laura, for your answers. Our next question, we have a raised hand actually from Lena Schlackmulder. And Lena is a Senior Vice President of Programs at Search for Common Ground. So Lena, your microphone.
Great, thank you, Jack. And fascinating presentations, Branka and Laura. You know, I have two questions briefly. You know, one is, can you share if you have a use case where you've been able to help and engage with peace building on understanding polarization online? That's the first question. And the second one is that, you know, you're both mentioning that there's this perception gap and feeling like we don't understand we don't know what we don't know when it comes to data scientists. And I feel that way, particularly also in terms of my questions around cost. Can you unpack just a little bit of maybe some of the myths and misperceptions about whether this costs a huge amount of money? Because we may wrongly be assuming that because it's work that's done by people who have different skills and this data scientist profile of skills, that it costs so much more than what we do as peace builders with our set of expertise. Thank you both.
Well, Branka, I can jump in. I'll take a quick pass. I'm gonna go backwards. I'll start with this costing a lot of money. What I would say is I'm going to talk to how we do it, because we're addressing that. That is, you know, underlying what Omdena is trying to do is to be very inclusive, so that those with the problems to solve and the people with the skills to solve it can come together in a way where we've removed a lot of the barriers. No one's waiting for that big foundation, you know, funding, or no one is trying to get a hold of, you know, engineers in Silicon Valley to pay attention to their problem. So, you know, that sort of matchmaking is precisely, you know, what we're trying to do, so that our projects are are not that expensive. But of course, I realize that's a relevant, relative thing, and I'd be happy to follow up. But we're looking for ways to constantly make this accessible so that this good work can be done. That's one thing. Polarization online. A number of our projects have touched, are around natural language processing, sort of kind of get into polarization, but we haven't done one that is focused exclusively on that. So, when we looked at the world energy, the transition to clean energy, we come across polarization of views. The example that I use is around like the yellow vest movement in France. If AI techniques might have been used to be sort of keeping track of how people were feeling about energy taxes and so on, some of that might have been predicted. It might have been possible to know that there were these very, very strong opposing views that could bubble over into some kind of unrest, civil unrest. So I think I'll leave it at that because Branka may know of other examples.
Thanks, Laura, and thanks, Lena, for amazing questions, especially this cost-related one. I think it's often something that is perceived as an obstacle to go into this work, and I think it's not that far away from the truth if you say that it's really costly, and it's not that far away from the truth if you say that it's not costly, depending what you want to do. So, for example, if you look at more advanced data science approaches or utilization of methods or experiments like what OpenAI is doing, the latest GPT-3 language generator that they are developing is a very costly thing. So not every organization would be able to jump onto something like this. But applications that we are talking about here and that Omdena is successfully doing, as Laura is saying, I think this approach is really democratizing the entire data science, especially in this field of data for good or AI for good. And so many things are really becoming more and more available, as I mentioned, not only on the data side of the story, but actually utilizing technologies itself. And what makes it more available is the availability of people themselves as well. And this is why I believe in this concept of connecting data scientists with Peacebuilders and field experts, because there are a lot of really amazing people in this data community who are willing to give their skills to tackling the world biggest problem, not biggest problems, anything that our societies are tackling with that is not on the financial side of the story of earning the money, right? Just doing something good for your community. So it's definitely available, and I think that cost should not be an obstacle for organizations to think about this. The other question regarding polarization, I do know a couple of organizations and examples. I was doing some mapping exercise of organizations who are utilizing data-driven approaches to peace and security as well. I can put some examples in the chat. I think one that is probably very familiar to the community of DME for Peace is Build Up project on polarization and tackling this through different natural language processing online. The other one that I really like to mention as an example is an organization called Moonshot. They are doing not the concretely political polarization, but they do tackle the different extremist type of speech online, and then trying to act, not only utilizing NLP to find this type of speech online, but actually act. So something that Peacebuilders would traditionally do in conflict mediation or mediating the conflicts, they are transferring to an online virtual space in social media and on different social platforms to react upon it. I'll stop here.
Great, thank you very much, Branka and Laura, for your amazing answers, and thank you, Lena, for your question. We're over time, so I want to wrap up with one sort of final question, which helps, I think, get a lot of what a lot of people online are probably wondering. How can, and this comes from Julie Hawk, who is our colleague at Build Up, and Julie writes, how can Peacebuilders cut through the hype of AI and not contribute to the hyperbole around it?
What comes to mind for me, I'll be brief, is to be practical, is to focus on practical applications. Look at the problems that you're facing. Think about, these are techniques. It's not magic. They're techniques, and they're techniques that allow data to expand the definition of data from what you're used to. So I think it's just diving in is the way to get around that. But I'll leave that to Branka.
Yes, thank you, Julie, for your question. I think it's important to, it's very important to emphasize this, and also to say that we are not a techno solutionists or AI solutionists. So we don't, I personally think this is the way, not thinking that AI or ML or any technology is necessarily a solution for everything. So be honest to what problems we are actually tackling and looking at these deep causes of problems and challenges, and then just look at this field of AI as a potential helping hand. So this is how I call it. I don't think this can replace people, and I think this is the way how to avoid the hype around it as well. Just be realistic, be careful that technologies can create unintended consequences as well, but be optimistic and think proactively how we can use them at places where we can actually use them.
That's a really nice way to finish. And one of the things which just struck me as I was listening to you speak, Branka, is that, and we spoke about this about a month or two ago, is that I've never had a conversation with someone in peacebuilding field that didn't connected to AI, that didn't somehow get towards conflict sensitivity and sort of understanding of the sort of the need for conflict sensitive adaptation of technology like AI in the peacebuilding field. So I think it's really curious that nobody on the line mentioned, the ethical use of artificial intelligence. And I think one of the things that I'm taking away from this is just not to be intimidated by when I see the terms of natural language processing or artificial intelligence. And I'm really excited to see what kind of ideas you hopefully get from today's audience and from other peacebuilders around the world through your AI Peacebuilding Challenge. Thank you again, Branka, and thank you, Laura, for just a wonderful presentation and a discussion. I know our audience really enjoyed it because we've got a number of sort of messages of thanks. So we really appreciate you joining us today, and thank you to our audience for your great questions and engagement throughout. Like I said, the recording will be posted online on the DME for Peace Media Gallery later today. Please feel free to return to it and share it with your colleagues. We will also post all the links that you saw today alongside the recording. Next webinar, the details of the next webinar are in your chat box right now. We're going to be back next week. That is Thursday, August 6th, as Amrit Cooper of Dobility joins us to lead a discussion on safer data collection for peacebuilding and development. We know that data is a problem in our field, and it's not just data analysis and understanding the data, it is actually collecting it, meeting it at the source. So I'm really looking forward to that discussion. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Branka. Please look out for each other, take care, and stay safe and healthy, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Jack and DME for Peace. Thank you to your audience for all of the questions, and let's continue this conversation.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for the fantastic questions. Really delighted to be able to be here today. This was fantastic. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Branka.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.